Hey y'all, my name is Dan and today we're going to be talking about return values in Python functions. A common question when using return values is, does my return value need to be a variable? And the answer is no. A return value can be a variable or it can be an expression. So let's take a look at that in a little bit more detail here. So here I have a function that I've defined called celebrate, which takes as its input a string and it adds an emoji on the left and an emoji on the right. So here we are returning a variable. First, we're taking name as our input. We're adding an emoji on either side, and we're storing the result of that in another variable called fun name. And then we're returning that variable to the caller. So here our words are hard. Here, our return value is a variable. So let's see what happens when we call this function. So first I'm going to run the code so that our function is defined. And now we can call celebrate with Dan as its input. And sure enough, we can see emojis were added on the left and right. So this is the return value of our function call. In this case, we're using this read evaluate print loop, sometimes called a REPL, which is printing the result of the function call for us. Another way that we could do this is we could define a variable called message, for example, and we could call celebrate with its input of Dan and store the result in a variable. And then if we wanted to see the value of that variable, we could print it out. Either way, totally valid. So this is a valid way of defining this particular function over here. Now let's look at a different way of doing this. So, like I mentioned, you don't need to return a variable. You can return an expression. In this example, we're returning an expression. So, same idea. We're adding an emoji on the left and right. This time the function has a slightly different name, celebrate2. And you can see instead of using a variable, we're just returning this expression. And when the function is called, this entire expression will be evaluated before it gets returned to the caller. So all of this code over here is going to be executed before it's returned. So if we call celebrate2 over here, I'm going to clear this output. If we call this function celebrate2 with the same input, we can see works the same way. So same result, different way of getting there. So this is one way of doing things. And a third thing that we can do is that expression can include, in this case, we're just concatenating strings together. We're adding strings together. But this isn't the only thing that we can do. We can include any kind of code in this expression. So for example, we could include a function call in the return statement. So let's see what that looks like. So I actually have this other example. I've defined a third and final function called foo. And foo is going to be a little bit lazy here, and it's not doing much on its own. It's just calling another function and returning the return value of that function. So let's take a look. In this return statement, we're seeing a function called toCelebrate with name as its input. So foo is going to get called with a name, with name as its input, and then foo is going to call celebrate, and it's going to just pass in name right into celebrate. And celebrate is going to run, and celebrate is going to give us a return value, which is going to have an emoji on either side of the input that we provide. And that's what this entire highlighted expression is going to evaluate to. And then that will be returned to whoever called the function foo. So let's take a quick look at that. So if we call foo with the input Dan, we should see this exact same result as before. And those are three different ways of using return values in Python. Now, a topic for another time is that return values are actually optional. So you don't even need to include a return value if you don't want to. But if you are going to include a return value, it doesn't just have to be a variable. It can be an expression, and that expression can include function calls. So I hope that helps.